I had worked night shifts before, in urgent care units, in small-town ERs, even in a psych facility once, but nothing quite prepared me for the silence of that place. It was my first night at the hospital, a private clinic in the south zone of São Paulo, tucked between a bakery and an abandoned gas station, with tall concrete walls and a flickering red cross that buzzed louder than any street noise. The inside was colder than I expected. Not from air conditioning, but from age, from things that had seeped into the walls. They assigned me to the observation wing. 4 beds, 1 security camera, and a nurse's station that felt more like a guard post than a place of care. The other nurse on duty, Marcia, showed me the basics, then said she'd be just down the hall for the rest of the shift. She didn't explain why she always kept the curtain closed around bed 4. She just told me to avoid disturbing the patient unless absolutely necessary. I remembered the exact moment I was left alone. It was 0:16. The monitors beeped softly, the fluorescent light above bed 2 buzzed intermittently, and the whole floor smelled faintly of alcohol and something old, something not entirely medical. I told myself I was fine, that I could handle this, that it was just another hospital. But as I sat behind the station, sipping cold coffee and scanning the patient logs, I noticed something strange. Bed 4 was marked as empty. No entry, no vitals, no name, just a line drawn across the chart, like someone had tried to erase it, but left enough behind to say, "Don't look closer." And that's when I heard the curtain shift. Not fully, just a soft brush, like fabric stirred by breath that shouldn't be there. I tried not to stare at the curtain, but the longer I sat there, the more it felt like it was staring at me. The monitors continued their soft beeping, and the camera feed above the station showed nothing out of place, just 4 beds in grayscale, still and sterile. Still no patient listed for bed 4. Still no movement. I checked the hallway clock, 1:08 a.m. It had only been 50 minutes since Marcy left, but the air already felt heavier, like the walls had absorbed too many secrets and were slowly pressing in to share them. I stood up, not because I wanted to, but because the silence had started to vibrate, like a pressure in my eardrums, like something waiting for acknowledgement. We walked to the edge of the observation room, stopping just before the curtain. From here, I could hear the faint whir of the AC unit, the shifting creak of the old tile floor, and something else, a rhythmic click, soft, uneven, almost like breathing through teeth. I leaned a little closer, not enough to see past the curtain, just enough to hear clearly. Click, click, pause, click, then silence. I stepped back, heart pounding now, the clipboard in my hand suddenly too heavy. I turned and started walking down the hallway, just to move, just to make some. But with every step, I could feel something behind me, toppling, not approaching, just digesting, lurking where the fluorescent light ended, somewhere between the hum and the hiss. When I glanced back at the security monitor, the curtain was still closed, but the shape behind it hadn't been there before. By 20:04 AM, the quiet had changed. It was no longer the kind of silence you get in a hospital after visiting hours, not the usual blend of machines and faraway footsteps. This was something else, the kind of quiet that feels personal, like the building itself was listening. I stayed behind the nurse's station, trying to convince myself that the form behind the curtain was just a shadow, a trick of light. A jacket hung awkwardly on the ivy pole, maybe. Nothing more. But deep down, I didn't believe it. The hallway lights buzzed, dimmed, then returned, slower, like they were struggling to wake up. I glanced at the monitor again. The shape was gone. The curtain, now slightly drawn open, revealed nothing. No patient. No IV. No explanation. The feed twitched once, a ripple of static running down the screen like a cold shiver. And in the middle of that brief distortion, I swear I saw something standing between beds 2 and 3. Not walking, not moving, just inserted. I stood slowly, knees stiff, body buzzing with a kind of fear that makes your skin feel separate from your muscles. Then came the cough. A single short burst, not from a sick patient, but from something trying to imitate one. It came from bed 3, the one closest to me. I looked up. There was nothing there. Just tangled sheets and the soft sway of the curtain between beds, like someone had just brushed past it without touching the floor. I found myself back behind the station, staring at the patient records. Bedford's chart was still blank, just a line across the page, like someone had started to write a name, then stopped. I turned the clipboard over. Nothing changed, but the paper felt warm, like it had just been in someone else's hands. I looked up at the monitor. All 4 beds in view, except now the curtain around bed 2 was half closed. I hadn't touched it, and no one had come in. I stood up, the floor creaking under my shoes, louder than it should. Each step felt like a signal. At the curtain I paused, held my breath. No sound, just the blood pressure monitor on the wall restarting itself. I hadn't touched that either. I pulled the curtain open in one motion. The bed was empty, but the pillow was indented, and the sheets were turned down, like someone had just been there, or was never meant to stay long. I didn't sit again. I stood on my feet, heart pounding steady and loud in my ears, eyes locked on the curtain I had just opened. It still moved, but not violently, just enough to remind me it hadn't finished with me. I walked backward toward the nurse's station, refusing to blink. At 3:41 a.m. the lights dimmed again, this time slower, like the power itself was hesitating. The monitor went black for 1 second. When it returned, the angle had shifted slightly. Bedford was in view again. The guest gone. In its place, just the bed. But on the sheet, someone had written something in sharp, jagged strokes. Word. I couldn't read it clearly. The resolution on that camera was always poor, but I could feel it, feel the weight of it. It was meant for me. I turned to the door, not even pretending I was in control anymore. The hallway was silent. Marthy wasn't back yet. No one else had entered the floor. I was alone. And yet, as I reached for the exit key clipped to my waist, I noticed the chart for bed 4 sitting neatly on the counter, closed, but slightly wet at the edges, as if someone had just finished touching it with damp fingers. I didn't open it. I just left it there and walked out. I didn't come back the next night, didn't answer their calls, didn't file a report. But weeks later, I saw a news clip online, short, local, barely shared. A fire had broken out in the clinic. Electrical, they said. Overnight shift. No survivors listed. But the footage showed something that stuck with me. Bed 4 was still intact, and someone had pulled the curtain closed. It was a Thursday, 1:47 a.m., and I had no clean clothes left, not even a backup t-shirt. I'd been in Brazil for about a month, working remotely from a tiny studio apartment above a closed florist's shop. My Portuguese was weak, my routine disjointed, and the heat in the building felt older than the structure itself. That night, I was restless. Sleep had come and gone too early, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting time just lying there. When I opened my wardrobe and realized I had nothing clean, I figured I might as well get it over with. I looked up lavanderias, 24 hours, There was one 3 blocks from my apartment. No reviews in English, just a few blurry photos, fluorescent lights, gray tile, cracked signage above the entrance that read Lava Facila. The street was empty when I left. Not quiet, just empty. The kind of emptiness that feels temporary, like something's about to return. When I reached the laundromat, the air inside was colder than expected. Not fresh, not sterile, just cold in a way that didn't match the outside. A row of washing machines lined one wall, dryers on the other, vending machine near the entrance, blinking faintly. The lights overhead buzzed with low, uneven rhythm. I was alone. I chose a washer near the middle and started the cycle. The room smelled like wet concrete and cheap detergent. Oh, humidity, oh, hours. I turned toward the dryers. That's when I saw one of them was already running. Far back in the corner, its round door vibrated slightly, fogged with moisture. And yet I could see it, even without looking closely. It was empty. No cloth, no towels, nothing. Just the drum turning slowly, as if that motion had been happening long before I arrived. The dryer kept turning, even with the display off. I sat, with my arms crossed, trying to ignore the way the sound seemed uneven. It wasn't broken exactly, but there was a slight pause between each rotation. Like a machine was thinking, or waiting. The laundromat stayed still. It's just that hum, that rhythm, filling the silence. As always, it didn't feel like background noise anymore. It felt central, deliberate. After a while, I got up and walked toward it. The drum turned slowly, fogging the glass from inside. I leaned in a little, expecting to confirm what I already knew. It was empty. But through the haze, something shifted. Not a person. Just the kind of subtle blur that suggests movement, like breath behind glass. I stepped back, and that's what I saw it. Near my washing machine, on the tile floor, a sock. Dark gray, rolled tight. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up. The fabric was slightly damp, but colder than it should have been, like it had been left in a place without light or air. Definitely not mine. I dropped it in the trash and turned back toward my washer. That's when I froze. It was another sock, identical, folded cleanly on top of the washer door. It was like someone had returned it, quietly, precisely, like they wanted me to know it had been missing. I loaded my clothes into the dryer, not the one in the back, but one of the 2 closer to the front. I chose it carefully, not out of logic, but instinct. It felt safer somehow. I set the timer, 20 minutes. The machine beeped once and started to spin. This time, the sound was right. Mechanical, consistent, impersonal. I exhaled. I sat back down and kept my eyes away from the back of the room. But it was like that other dryer still pulled at my attention, even silently. I could feel it, like someone standing just outside your peripheral vision, not moving, just existing. I tried to check my phone. No, sirs. No notifications. The screen flickered once, then froze on the home screen. Irisa liked it and set it down. The minutes passed slowly. I stared at the vending machine. The blinking light inside had stabilized, but the glass still caught reflections strangely, like it wasn't flat anymore. I got up to stretch, just for movement, just to feel like my body was still mine. As I turned back toward my dryer, I stopped. The digital timer still read 18:43, exactly what it had shown minutes ago. I waited, watching it. Nothing changed. I bent down, pressing my ear near the vent. The drum was still turning. I could feel it. A low vibration in the panel, subtle but real. But the timer wasn't moving. Time itself had paused. I stood up slowly, my palms slightly damp. And just for a second, in the chrome panel of the machine, I thought I saw movement behind me. Not a reflection, not even a shape. Just the suggestion of something wrong with the light. I didn't go near the dryer again. It kept spinning. The timer stuck at 1843. Like the cycle wasn't for me anymore. I sat back down, but the air felt different. Not warm, not cold, just heavy, like the room was waiting for something. I stared at the vending machine. Its buzzing had stopped without me noticing. The light inside flickered once, briefly dimming, then came back. That's when I saw it. Near the bottom shelf, scratched into the plastic with something sharp. "Don't leave wet." The letters were uneven and deep, as if carved slowly, with force. Not vandalism, ornate. I stood and walked toward it, drawn in without thinking. The glass felt slightly warm, like someone had just touched it. Behind me, the dryer made a soft creaking sound. Not a beep, not a dock. As they shifted, like weights settling, he turned back. The drum was still turning, but the sound had changed. Heavier, strained, as if something inside was resisting the spin. I stood in front of the dryer, unsure if I should open it. The clothes inside weren't just spinning anymore, they were dragging. The sound was slower, heavier, like the drum was pushing against weight. The timer still showed 1843. Nothing had moved. I reached out and pressed cancel. The display blinked once. Then, the machine stopped with a soft hiss. Not mechanical, more like a breath released too close to my face. I opened the doors slowly. There was no rush of heat, no static, just stillness. I pulled the clothes out one by one. They were dry, but not warm. Not in the way they should have been after a cycle. They felt like they'd been sitting for hours in a room with no air. I shoved everything into my bag and zipped it shut. As I turned to leave, I glanced once toward the back. The far dryer, the one that had been running when I arrived, was on again. Spinning, silent, its display still off. And this time, something moved inside. Not clearly, not a person, just a shape pressing gently against the fogged glass. Not trying to get out, just reminding me it was still there. I didn't run, didn't speak. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was warmer than before. The streets were empty, not just of people, of sound, of movement. Like the night had paused, just for me. I didn't look back. But every time I walk past a laundromat now, no matter what city I'm in, no matter the hour, I swear I hear it. Dump. Buzz. I never imagined myself working in a library, especially not the night shift. But it was the first job I got when I moved to Brazil. Underpaid, quiet, and supposedly easy. Just watch the cameras, reset the study desks, and make sure the doors are locked by sunrise. The building was old, 4 floors. The first 3 had motion sensor lights and working elevators. The 4th didn't. That's where the archives were. And the university insisted they stayed accessible even after midnight in case graduate students needed them. No one ever did. Most nights, I never saw a single person on the 4th floor. And I preferred it that way. That night, the building felt emptier than usual. The halls were too quiet, not just from lack of people, but from something in the way the silence held itself. Weighted, heavy, suspended. At 1:34 a.m., I started my routine. Wiped down the reading tables, returned any returned books. Double-check if anyone was still logged into the terminals. When I passed the front desk, I noticed one of the sign-out notebooks had been moved. It sat just a little crooked. I straightened it and kept going. The elevator lights were off, meaning the lift was idle, parked at the ground floor. Still, when I turned the corner toward the stairwell, I heard something. A soft, mechanical groan, like the sound of old pulleys adjusting weight. I paused, waited for it to stop. It didn't. The noise echoed from above. From the 4th floor, the elevator hadn't moved, but something upstairs had. I climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the air shift around me. It wasn't colder, just heavier. Still, the 4th floor didn't have motion sensors like the others. You had to put the lights on manually. I paused at the switch, listening. Nothing, and I pressed it. The lights buzzed awake one by one, revealing the familiar corridor, archive shelves, locked cabinets, everything quiet and still, except for one chair. Halfway down the aisle, a single wooden chair had been pulled back from a table, just enough to catch my eye, touch enough to feel intentional. I walked toward it, scanning the shelves. No footsteps, no sounds, no sign of anyone. The chair looked ordinary, but its position felt off, slightly turned, slightly watching. I pushed it back under the table, and in that same moment I felt a shift behind me. Not a breeze, not movement. Here's the pressure in the space. I turned quickly. No one. But at the far end of the aisle, a cabinet door now hung half open, and I was sure it had been shut. I stood still for a few seconds, staring at the cabinet door. It wasn't wide open, just barely ajar, enough to suggest a hand had touched it, enough to confirm I wasn't alone up here. I walked toward it slowly, scanning the aisle with each step. Nothing moved, but the silence was different now. Not just quiet, dense, like it was waiting. I reached the cabinet and nudged the door open. Inside, just folders stacked neatly, labeled by year, all undisturbed. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there seconds before I arrived. That they had opened it to look at something they didn't want found, or to leave something behind. I closed it gently and turned back. That's when I noticed it. Halfway down the aisle on one of the shelves, a book was sticking out. Not dramatically, just a few centimeters out of line, but this was the archive floor. Nothing ever moved here unless someone moved it. I walked toward it. As I got closer, I realized the title had been scratched off the spine. The rest of the shelf was untouched. This book was out of place. Anonymous. So I reached for it and stopped. Somewhere behind me, something shifted. Not footsteps, not breathing, just a slow tension in the air, like someone standing very still was no longer pretending to be still. I turned. The aisle was empty, but the hallway lights behind me flickered once, and again. Then they held, and in that moment I realized I hadn't heard them turn on when I came up. I stepped away from the shelf, not taking the book. I didn't want to know what was inside it, or who had placed it there. I walked back toward the stairwell, but something stopped me. A change in the air. Not a sound, just that shift again, like the building had inhaled. Instead of going down, I turned into the reading room. It was a wide open space. 6 long tables, all empty. A few forgotten pens. Chairs slightly out of place. The lights overhead flickered once, but held. My steps felt too loud on the linoleum. I paused near the center table and looked around. Nothing moved. No doors. No paper rustling. But I still felt watched. You said, not because I wanted to, because I needed to see if sitting made it stop. It didn't. My eyes drifted toward the tall windows at the far end. They were dark. The glass reflected the room back at me, warped, colorless, slightly off. There was no movement behind me, but there was something in the reflection that didn't match. A faint silhouette, darker than the rest of the room, Too vague to define, but there. And I turned quickly. Nothing behind me. But when I looked back at the glass, the silhouette was gone. And the chair across from me, empty just moments ago, now sat slightly pulled back. I stood up, slower than I meant to. The chair across from me remained still, slightly pulled back, as if someone had just risen from it. But I hadn't heard a sound. No scrape of leg, no shift of weight, just that new kind of silence, full and watchful. I walked toward the center of the room, unsure of what I was looking for. The hallway was empty. The stairwell was open. I could have left, but something in me refused to turn my back. I returned to the fourth floor's front desk and sat behind it. The screens on the old security monitor flickered weakly. Black and white feeds from every floor. All still, except one. Camera 4, the reading room. The feed showed the same tables, same scattered chairs, except the one I had just been sitting in was gone. Not part of frame, just not there. The space where it should be was empty. I stared at the monitor. Right blankly. Now, nothing changed. I looked up from the screen and glanced down the hallway. The door to the reading room was still open. But now, from here, I could see a single chair positioned in the middle of the entrance. Not any of the ones from the tables. It was one of the front desk chairs, the kind only employees used, facing the hallway, as if waiting for me to come back. I didn't move. I didn't go back inside. At 5:58 a.m., I turned off the monitors, signed the logbook, and left without finishing my rounds. I didn't tell anyone, but the next night, when I returned, I found a note taped to the monitor. 2 words, written in shaky, fading ink. Still here.